perpetuate and give these people the recognition they deserve.
And some of these campaigns, some of those slogans move right on through history. I mean, they literally can stick around. Only you can prevent wildfires, even though it started as forest fires. I mean, that lasts decades, and Smokey Bear is still around. But we're seeing a difference in how they're distributed and how much time networks are willing to give up to these.
With your Working Virginia update, I'm Doug Cunningham.
We are not fighting just for our members. We are fighting for all working people. We stand up for the working people. Whether you carry a union card or not, we're going to be there for you. So that if you're injured on the job, you'll be taken care of. So that if you get sick, you'll be taken care of. So that you can earn a wage so that you can take care of yourself and your family.
Dan Duncan, president of the AFL-CIO's Northern Virginia Central Labor Council. Duncan says the economy is still issue number one for Virginians, and there's been little or no economic stimulus effort from Virginia's government.
The economy is still the most important thing to all of us. We want to make sure that all working people have a job that pays well and takes care of their needs.
Working Virginia update produced by Workers Independent News. I'm Doug Cunningham.
This update made possible by the Office and Professional Employees International Union, ensuring fair treatment, fair wages, and benefits for thousands of working Virginians. Online at opeiu.org.
Why would former Attorney General Ramsey Clark care whether the Army major found guilty of mass murder at Fort Hood is forced to shave his beard?
My name is Ramsey Clark, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Major Nadal Malik Hassan, who represented himself but offered no defense in his military trial, was found guilty of murdering 13 soldiers at Fort Hood in November 2009 and sentenced to death. He now sits on the Army's death row in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, pending the result of his automatic appeal. Army officials there are insisting that Hassan, who has grown a beard as required by his belief in Islam, must comply with the Army's grooming rule that prohibits soldiers from having a beard or a goatee. And if Hassan won't shave off his beard by himself, the prison will use force to shave it off for him. Hassan might try to stop this by enforcing his rights under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, but no military lawyer is authorized to file that lawsuit for him. So, human rights attorney Ramsey Clark, who has expressed concern over the beard issue and other aspects of Hassan's case, is going to visit him in Fort Leavenworth. We expect Mr. Clark to take the position that in America, religious freedom is a fundamental right for everyone, both the revered and the despised, including a convicted mass murderer on death row in Fort Leavenworth.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Packers.
Vikings.
We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News Service. I'm Jesse Russell. Organized labor received some good news in the midst of its 2013 Constitutional Convention in Los Angeles this week. On Monday, an Indiana judge ruled that the state's right-to-work law was unconstitutional. Judge John Sadia ruled the law unconstitutional because it required unions to provide benefits to non-members without just compensation. The law was challenged by Operating Engineers Local 150, and the union's general president, James Callahan, announced the ruling on the convention floor.
Local 150 argued Indiana's right-to-work law is unconstitutional because it makes it illegal for unions to collect fees for services that are federally required to be provided. This is a victory for the middle class. These laws are nothing but thinly veiled tools to weaken unions, and this is a big win for workers who rely on unions to provide decent wages and benefits.
On Thursday, Indiana Attorney General Greg Zoller filed an appeal to the ruling, and it will be sent directly to the Indiana Supreme Court. That announcement came shortly before a resolution was introduced and passed, calling on the AFL-CIO to develop a Southern organizing strategy. The resolution was partially born out of the predominance of right-to-work laws that have been passed in southern states over the last decade. AFSCME Florida Council 79 President Jeanette Wynn spoke on the floor to explain how right-to-work laws have been detrimental to working people all across the South.
Suppression of dues deduction, suppression of pension, and suppression of all those state benefits that state employees have earned throughout their career.
This week, the labor movement also became more inclusive by adopting a resolution supporting gender identity and expression. The resolution, which passed unanimously, means the AFL-CIO will officially recognize the rights of transgendered employees. International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers International President Ed Hill introduced the resolution.
This amendment makes an important statement about the Federation's support for transgender workers and the fact that they are welcome in our movement. It shows that we're a broad and inclusive movement that welcomes all workers.
You've been listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Brought to you with support from the Bank of Labor, a division of Brotherhood Bank and Trust, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. The Bank of Labor is union-owned, union-represented, and the bank of choice for unions and their members. Now you can work with a bank that shares labor values. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C. Heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with David Shuster.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Hello and welcome to Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch all weekend. You can find me at karlfrisch.com. That's KarlFrisch. Connect with me on Twitter and Facebook. And don't forget to connect with the show at takeactionnews.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter as well. Special shout out to our syndicate stations, WCPT in Chicago, Chicago's Progressive Talk. And of course, special thanks to Pete Callahan, Rachel Calvert, and Troy Miller on the controls. Now let's get on with the news. This week we saw the first federal government shutdown in nearly 20 years. The shutdown will persist until Congress agrees to pass a funding bill that President Obama is willing to sign. Thus far, the Obama administration has been quite clear that it will only support such a measure that leaves the Affordable Care Act in place, something House Republicans remain intent on killing. Yesterday, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas reiterated the incalcitrant right-wing position on the funding issue. You may recall that last week, Cruz gave an extended speech on the Senate floor advocating for repeal of Obamacare. Here's Cruz.
The House of Representatives has repeatedly compromised already. The House began, it is the view of every Republican in this body, and indeed every Republican in the House, that Obamacare should be entirely and completely repealed. Nonetheless, the House started with a compromise of saying not repealing Obamacare, but simply that it should be defunded.
The shutdown has highlighted a particularly partisan cognitive dissonance among the right wing. Many on the right are lauding the shutdown, while at the same time blaming Obama for the inconvenient stoppage of popular government services. Fox News has, in fact, become fond of calling it a government slim down. Author and noted conservative hate merchant Ann Coulter appeared on Sean Hannity's program this week to explain how the shutdown is a partisan Democratic ploy.
He's doing this to punish people so that he can blame Republicans when it is 100% the Democrats. I mean, aren't we now down to they've given up on defunding Obamacare?
Yeah, no, all they're saying is get rid of the exemptions.
Yes, no. Then they go to delay it for a year, and now the government is shut down because Congress refuses to live under Obamacare.
Tired hag. Saturday morning, the House voted unanimously to award back pay to furloughed federal workers when the shutdown is finally lifted. In a demonstration of the radical rhetoric surrounding the shutdown, Fox Business host and Revolutionary War desire Stuart Varney argued this week against awarding furloughed federal workers with back pay during a delusional rant.
Opinion, this is President Obama's shutdown. He is responsible for shutting this thing down. He's taken an entirely political decision here. No, I don't think they should get their back pay, frankly. I really don't. I'm sick and tired of a massive, bloated federal bureaucracy living on our backs and taking money out of us, a lot more money than most of us earn in the private sector, then giving a furlough and then getting their money back at the end of it. Sorry, I'm not for that. I want to punish these people.
Right. Also this week, 34-year-old Miriam Carey was fatally shot by Capitol Police following a car chase resulting from her effort to drive through a perimeter barrier at the White House. Carey was shot outside the Hart Senate building. She was unarmed. Her baby, also in the car, was unharmed. Later in the program, we'll talk with Tara Culp-Ressler, health editor at Think Progress, about what this incident can teach us about the stigmatization and treatment of depression. After the shooting, the House commended Capitol Police officers, awarding them with badges of honor. However, as a result of the shutdown, Capitol Police were working without pay this week, further illustrating the real-world impact of the GOP-led government shutdown. The shutdown has ignited a conversation about the value of government programs and services. Up next, we'll be talking with Tina Dupuy about her latest column concerning Obamacare and her in-laws. Stick around.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Arc. The Arc is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Arc is also home to the Arc Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Arc, so stop by and see them. The Arc, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Arc's website, www.thearcdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Arc, part of Southeast D.C.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. All weekend, I'm Karl Frisch. So, this week, the enrollment for Obamacare began. And if you're like me, which is, you're one of tens of millions of Americans, you're a very happy person. As somebody who went out on my own and no longer had employer-based health insurance a couple years ago, and somebody who's had a childhood history of asthma, I have been denied by just about every healthcare provider you can possibly imagine over the last 2 years. So imagine my happiness when on October 1st, the enrollment period for Obamacare began, and finally I'm able to enroll in a healthcare program. And it's not terribly expensive. It's actually a lot cheaper than I was expecting it to be. All the stories that you heard about people having trouble enrolling. So here's what happened. I get my computer and I go to healthcare.gov and it asks me a couple questions, really simple. Where do I live? Then it transfers me to the DC Health Exchange network. And that's when I create an account. I fill in a whole bunch of information and it gives me literally dozens of healthcare programs to choose from the inexpensive monthly premiums with a higher overall deductible to a more expensive premium with a lower deductible, with all sorts of different kinds of coverage. I call my doctor to find out which programs he's taking, and I complete my application. All told, for a premium health insurance package, a gold plan as it's called on their website, I think it's like $248 a month, which is a lot of money. But when I was paying into a COBRA, I was paying almost 3 times that. So this is really great news. And I am not the only person out there with this problem. I mean, the media and the internet has been riddled with stories of people whose lives have been changed for the better as a result of a few basic things that are happening under the Affordable Care Act now. You've got pre-existing conditions that are now no longer keeping people from being able to sign up for coverage. You've got these lifetime caps that people used to encounter that are no longer going to be in place. So imagine that you have cancer and your insurance company says, we are going to save your life as long as it's cheaper than $250,000. That's essentially what was happening for a lot of people. They would pay their insurance premiums, and the insurance company would agree to cover them until they had reached a certain cap. And once they reached that certain cap, they would no longer cover them. And the idea that you would ever subject your health to a company simply because they wanted to save money it's preposterous. And that's not to mention the other benefits from the Affordable Care Act. You've got people whose children, think about the economy right now. You've got people who have children who are out of college. They did what they were supposed to do. They went and got a college degree. and they couldn't find a job. It's been difficult for folks to find a job, especially young people. And now parents no longer have to kick their children off of their health care plans when they, turn 24, because children are allowed to be covered until they are 26 years old. That has a big impact on people as they're trying to find their way into the workforce. This is not just for folks that had these various different kinds of either pre-existing conditions or severe medical problems that led to caps. There are also millions of Americans who could not afford to have health insurance and did not have jobs that provided health insurance, who will now get government subsidies to help pay for it. I can't tell you what, and these are, not serious problems for me, but I can't tell you what it was like living for 2 years without health insurance, where you worry about what would happen if you got sick, how you would be able to pay for a hospital visit if it came to that. For families that have to make that choice every single day between paying for rent to keep a roof over their heads, or in the words of George W. Bush, to put food on their family, this is no longer a choice. This no longer factors in the equation. You have people that are now getting health insurance for $100 to $150 a month for their family, and that's a good thing. And what are we watching? We're watching Republicans do everything they can to stop this program from getting there. The one time, I remember when the plan was first getting debated on the Hill, and Republicans, I heard one kernel of truth from the Republicans in their opposition to Obamacare. They said, the problem is Democrats are trying to get people hooked on the idea that they are, that they have a right to health insurance. And I couldn't agree more. I think they were actually right. We are trying to get people hooked on the idea that they have a right to health insurance, that they have a right to being healthy. And one of the things, Tina Dupuy, a good friend of the show, wrote a column this week about what it's been like for her family, and how big of an impact something like this has on a family, as they spend a fortune. So joining us now is Tina Dupuy, the syndicated columnist and friend of the show. Tina, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Carl. How are you?
I'm good. So you have this great piece about Obamacare and your family. I was just going through my own story about how, because of childhood asthma, pre-existing condition, I've been denied health insurance for going on 2 years now. And you tell the story of your in-laws in your column this week, which people can read at tinadupuy.com. Tell us about it.
My in-laws are kind of emblematic of the meltdown. Here's two people who have worked their entire lives and worked in middle management in different, in an industry that was related to housing, right? So they, of course, after the meltdown, they lost their jobs, and they're in their 50s, they're in their mid-50s, and they've done everything right. Their house is now paid for, and because of a combination of pre-existing conditions and just being 55, which is its own pre-existing conditions, the only health coverage they could get was COBRA, and it was $1,000 each a month.
Yeah, I remember when I left my last full-time job, I was paying almost $600 a month for COBRA.
Yeah. They were paying $24,000 a year just for health insurance. They're not even sick. And the thing is that they're now unemployed and they don't have any money coming in. And so they are not able, they're basically going broke and they're not even sick.
Well, and so, I don't know if your in-laws are like my parents, who probably think that Obamacare is a government plot to put chips in their necks so they can be monitored and put in the conservative death camps. But what's been their reaction to the idea that they can sign up for something so much more cheap now?
They're really excited. I mean, this was one of these things where the COBRA was running out in January. They were going to go without health insurance, which of course is, not a good idea because they could lose their house. And
a lot of people do. I mean, one of the leading causes of bankruptcy in this country pre-Obamacare was bankruptcy as a result of a medical condition or catastrophe.
Right, exactly. And I mean, and we've kind of accepted this as the norm, right? Where it's like the reverse of the lottery, right? We hope that our number doesn't get called.
Right.
And we kind of go like, okay, well, if I'm lucky, I will stay healthy enough to be able to be successful. And, and you'll hear all the time about people who have lost everything because they came down with some kind of disease. And Breaking Bad, it's, we've just kind of accepted this as part of the American experience, and it's just not necessary. And when people find out that it is indeed just regulating the health insurance industry, Obamacare, and making healthcare affordable to the average person, to the average working person, and that you would be able to actually get sick and not be kicked off of your insurance. I mean, the things that 5 years ago you and I talked about all the time, that it's obscene that this happens. It's obscene that we are not able to live in this country and not get dropped by our private insurance if we actually need to use it.
Right.
Those are all the things that are in healthcare.
Well, and it's not just that. And it's funny, you go online and you read these stories of conservatives who are now signing up for Obamacare and how shocked they are that the horror stories that they've been fed by Fox News and Conservative Talk Radio and Sarah Palin, et cetera, are not true. A good friend of mine recently got in. He's had insurance. He's doing perfectly fine. He received a letter in the mail from Aetna, his health insurance provider, saying that because of the Affordable Care Act, he now had a choice between the plan he was on, which cost X dollars, and a version of it that administered by the Affordable Care Act, which would be $600 less a month.
Right. And that's the thing where you kind of lose credibility, right? I mean, the Republicans have been telling us how this is basically the end of America as we know it.
It's a government takeover, except when you fill out the paperwork on the website, it's do you want to sign up for Blue Cross or Aetna or?
Right, but they're going to be really upset when they figure out that this is not socialized medicine. This is private insurance.
This is a giant government subsidy to corporate America.
You got it. Absolutely. So, really, it's basically regulating private. It's a giveaway to private insurance, but regulating them in a way that they should not be happy about, which is good for us. Because right now, I think I saw Alan Grayson on Bill Maher's show last night, and he's there is a conflict of interest with your insurance company. If you actually need to use your insurance, suddenly it gets into it kind of carves out their profit.
Right. I mean, that's the notion, right? And it's funny because you hear conservatives talk about how horrible this is, that you're bringing more people into this. It's going to make it harder for the insurance company. It's well, that's what, when you group of people, we have a group of people together and you're pooling the risk. It has a name. It's called insurance.
Yes.
That's the whole point here.
It is. Right. Exactly. And also, the cost, what we pay for health coverage is actually, what we get for health coverage and what we pay out are extreme, right? So we pay the most of any other industrialized nation, and we also are 27th in health insurance.
Right. It's very interesting. If you look at the numbers, where America does well in terms of results from healthcare and health treatment is in catastrophic illnesses, cancer, other major surgeries where the life is at stake. Where they do poorly, and they don't do that much better in that area, by the way. Where they do poorly is in general upkeep, going to the doctor for your physical, getting treated for a cold, all of those kinds of things. That's where we fall off the map entirely. And hopefully that will change here. I mean, one of the things that people are going to be shocked at is, let's say that you sign up for Obamacare and you're paying X number of dollars and you're getting Blue Cross Blue Shield. And if Blue Cross Blue Shield for some reason spends, if they spend, I think over 20% of the money that they bring in on marketing or back end costs, salaries, etc., they're going to have to pay that back to the consumer, and you'll get a check in the mail.
We've already had people say, like, why am I getting a check in the mail from my insurance company? Why is my insurance suddenly lower? And not knowing why that is, and it's because of this new law. We're seeing this kind of like uproar, really about social change, right? These are the people who don't like the Affordable Care Act. These are the same people that are still mad about the income tax, which turned 100 years old this week. Right.
I mean, you can go online and search for how Republicans reacted to Medicare and Social Security. Very similarly. Tina Dupuy, it's a fascinating, great read as always. Thanks for joining us again this week.
Thank you, Carl.
Of course, people should go to your website, tinadupuy.com, sign up for your email list, follow you on Twitter and Facebook. This is Take Action News, and we've got more of a great show coming up for you, so stick around.
You're listening to Take Action News on We Act Radio, produced at the studios of WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C., your nation's capital.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And after a couple of weeks, I went to my doctor.
A sore, lump, or thick patch in your mouth or throat could be a symptom of oral cancer.
My doctor told me I was smart to come in. He said that oral cancer is more common in African American men than in any other group in the U.S. It turns out I did have oral cancer, but it was caught early and my treatment was successful. I'm glad I got it checked. That probably saved my life.
If you're an African American man, you need to know about oral cancer. Visit a doctor or dentist if you see changes in your mouth that don't go away after 2 weeks. It's important to get an oral cancer exam because if you do have cancer, the earlier it's caught, the better. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
You know, this used to be a good neighborhood. Now it's a mess. You got all these polyps running around.
Colon cancer almost always starts with the polyp. Get the polyp early and stop colon cancer before it even starts.
Where do you think you were running to, huh? I didn't even see you guys there. I don't know.
Get the test, get the polyp.
I want to talk to my lawyer!
Get the cure.
I got a phone call!
CD is for everybody, not just for the few. Anyone can share VD with someone nice as you.
If you're curious or confused, get information or a pamphlet at most pharmacies or a health clinic. If you need help, see a doctor.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians. 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm still Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I don't know if you've been following the stuff going on in the Gulf, but the BP oil spill still has residue all over the place, particularly when it comes to our legal system. Joining me now to talk about the Drop Dudley campaign is the Corporate Action Network's Brian Young. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Carl. Good to talk to you.
Absolutely. So walk us through this, because I think a lot of people have been convinced that everything's fine and dandy in the Gulf because they've seen, and I think I have an exact calculation here, but $1.752 quadrillion in BP advertising about how great the Gulf is now.
Yeah, that's what we see. But just like, the chemical dispersants scattered the oil all over, but out of our sight, what's going on with down in the Gulf is still going on, and their PR is basically the rhetorical equivalent of that. There's two different things. There's multiple legal cases going on, but in the broadest sense, what's happening is that there was a settlement, a partial settlement, because there are sort of many overlapping claims here. But when it comes to businesses in the Gulf, it was a very, very large settlement that BP negotiated with a big set of attorneys representing the people of the Gulf. And then once the claims started to come in, BP realized that they were on the hook for much more money than they thought they were, because the damage they had done, the damage that the spill had done, was so extensive. And it gets pretty technical pretty quickly, but essentially BP lost in court when they challenged it, so they tried to bump it up to the appeals court. And then this week, an appeals, a panel made up of 2 Bush appointees and 1 Clinton appointee. We've all heard this story before.
Sure.
Partially agreed with BP. The major part of their claims was to basically throw out the claims administrator and all this kind of stuff. But essentially, this is a long legal strategy, just like the Exxon Valdez, to just delay. And meanwhile, the people in the Gulf who are hurt aren't seeing the money that they need. And business going out of business, things like that. So eventually, when BP finally has to pay up at some point in the future, some of these people won't even be, some of these businesses won't even exist to put in claims. So they're trying to push off that day of reckoning as long as possible. And then covering that up, layering on top of that this amazingly large PR strategy, which is not just in the Gulf, but full-page ads in the paper, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, all over this kind of stuff to reassure investors that they're, digging in for the long haul, essentially, so that investors don't need to worry that much right now.
Well, so tell us about the Drop Dudley campaign. He's Bob Dudley is the chief executive of BP, and you all want him replaced with someone who will honor the company's promise to adequately compensate those affected by the Deepwater Horizon explosion.
That's correct. There's a sense with these kinds of situations where the company, not to get too sort of historical, but in the early parts of the progressive movement, when they were fighting these large companies in the late 19th, 20th centuries, they were pretty much the representatives of a single person. It was John D. Rockefeller, Carnegie, people like that. But today's corporations are so complex and so entrenched and networked through the country that they have a tendency to kind of throw out the PR firms and things like that. And what we're saying is that Bob Dudley is responsible for, for the current, as the leader of BP, for the current course, and he should, he should take responsibility, and that BP should, look at his performance, find someone who's ready to pay up for the Gulf. And, I think that it's actually, I would argue that it's in the long-term interest of BP as well, because they're doing their, long-term prospects some damage if they continue on this course. It could be argued, and an executive like Bob Dudley has a different time horizon. And what we are in general at the Corporate Action Network, we want to argue for, a more, more responsible set of corporate behavior. The corporations are now so entrenched in our society, and our traditional sort of relationships of government over corporations is getting so warped that we really want, in this BP case is a specific one where, BP is negligent. Now they're in court arguing whether it's negligence or gross negligence, but, everyone sort of agrees on that, and that they need to, step up, take care of this, and then they can move on. But, they want to delay the day of reckoning as long as possible, get out of as much as possible, and the people in the Gulf are the ones being hurt by all this.
Well, what kind of response are you getting from the campaign? I can imagine that in this day and age, you're right, corporate America is a lot different than it was even 20 years ago. I can imagine it's an uphill fight, but I can imagine that it resonates with a lot of people who were impacted.
Yeah, it is. And we've just launched this. And the thing about these campaigns, one of the things, the Corporate Action Network, we have the actionnetwork.org, which we launched a couple of weeks ago, is a new networked action platform for people. In small groups, large groups, anyone can use it. And it has a full suite of action tools. But the difference between, this and sort of the action tools that came before is that this is a networked infrastructure so that campaigns can have more creative structures, because we have a limited time horizon when you're thinking in terms of traditional coalitions, and those kinds of time horizons don't work when you're going against these large corporations. So we have, we launched this campaign a week and a half ago. We've gotten a great initial response from it, but we're not in this for the short term, and
Right.
That's the difference between the campaign that's going to work against a BP and a campaign that maybe could get a couple of good hits in, but ultimately doesn't change the equation. Because what we want to do is create campaigns that take the success of each campaign and build into the next one, so that over time the infrastructure around a campaign and around an issue gets strengthened more and more and more, so that we can win some battles, but then over time we can win the war. And right now, when you go against these large corporations, sometimes we win a battle here, a battle there, but we're always kind of slowly beaten down.
Brian, we're running out of time, but if you could tell folks at home how they can take action, what would you say?
I'd say, first of all, you go to actionnetwork.org and sign the petition to drop Dudley, and then start organizing. It's the Action Network platform is a do-it-yourself organizing tool. So within the structure of the campaign, they can do their own actions, they can build their own groups, and then as this grows, we'll be able to feed the things that they need to take action. So go to Action Network, sign the petition, and then start organizing, because together we can make a difference. If we're individually fighting the battles, we're never going to win.
Alrighty, folks, you heard it here. Brian Young, thanks for joining us so we can talk about the Drop Dudley campaign. Be sure to check it out on Corporate Action Network's website. Brian, thanks for joining us.
All right, thank you. Good to talk to you, Carl.
Alrighty. I hate to sound like a local news person, but when we come back, we'll talk about something that could kill you. Stick around.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East.
Go Red Wolves!
Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away.
Education beyond high school. A path to opportunity and success for our young people. And the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream. Because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work-study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are federal student aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentaid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on healthcare while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. All weekend. So if you're like me, you have Tylenol in your medicine cabinet, and you've probably taken Tylenol. You've probably taken too much Tylenol, too. I was listening to NPR's This American Life a few weeks ago, and I was shocked, floored, horrified at how easy it is to overdose on acetaminophen, which is the primary ingredient of Tylenol. And when you find out what happens when you overdose from acetaminophen, it's even more terrifying. Joining us to chat about this subject, which I think deserves a lot more attention than it's getting, is Jeff Girth. He's a writer with ProPublica, and he's been kind enough to join us on his weekend. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Thank
Said in the introduction, I mean, this is something that nobody ever thinks about. I mean, you reach a certain age and you don't even look at the warning label on a bottle of Tylenol.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had sort of if you go a little bit over the recommended dose, you can get into trouble, and there are hundreds, I think maybe 600 drugs that have the same ingredient, acetaminophen, in it, so you can unknowingly be taking two different medicines that both have the same ingredient, and when you start adding it up, you can get over the recommended dose pretty quickly.
Well, and when you say that you can go over it pretty quickly, you really can go over it pretty quickly. And there's this notion, I think a lot of people confuse ibuprofen for acetaminophen. And so when you hear things like safer than aspirin, a lot of people probably assume, well, Tylenol's safer than, it's just as safe. And it's really not. Talk to us a bit about, you looked into these cases, the CDC has been investigating it. There are lots of people every year that OD, and basically your liver shuts down when you OD from acetaminophen. A lot of people experience this every single year, and it's not on purpose.
Right. Well, there are a lot of people who can take the medicine and not have a problem, so I think I want to sort of make that clear. But the issue is that, first of all, the FDA and the scientists who have studied this are still not sure exactly why some people are more susceptible to having potential harm from taking too much of this than others. So there's a big unknown there, even though the drug's been on the market for all these many decades. And, the second thing is that people can have liver injury. They can wind up having a transplant, and in rare situations, they can die. We found that the CDC data show about 300 people a year die from acetaminophen toxicity. A little more than half of them are accidental, and the rest are either intentional suicide, or the CDC is not sure, which it is.
But the CDC's long been aware of the problems with acetaminophen. They've just not been doing much about it until now, right?
Right. Well, the agency that has jurisdiction is the FDA. The CDC collects mortality data, but they're not the regulator of the drug. The regulator of the drug is the Food and Drug Administration, and they've been aware of this issue for 40 or 50 years. Back in 1972. Mm-hmm. They appointed an expert panel to look at all the analgesics, meaning, aspirin and other pain relievers. And the panel came back after 5 years of study and lots of testimony and analysis, and said, well, these drugs are generally okay, but acetaminophen needs a warning on it that you can suffer severe liver damage if you take too much of it. And the FDA deliberated and put some things on, but eventually took 32 years before they required the warning that the expert panel had recommended in 1977.
Why does it take so long for something to happen like that?
Well, it's a couple of different reasons. One is that the process that the FDA set up involves the so-called Administrative Procedures Act, which involves seeking comment from anybody who wants to comment and proposing rules and responding, and it's a very cumbersome regulatory process. Having said that, the FDA itself projected in 1977 that the whole process should be done in about 15 months. And as I said, actually the process today is still not finished with acetaminophen. They have come out with this one rule about the warning for liver damage, but they're still debating, like, how much is the proper recommended dose. 32 years later, after it, by their own estimates, it should have been done. It wasn't a big priority for the FDA. They didn't have enough staff. They had disputes within the agency. They get overwhelmed by comments. McNeil, the makers of Tylenol, filed thousands of pages of comment to the FDA. And
so they had a vested interest in slowing this down.
Well, they certainly had a vested interest. As they said in their own filing in 1977, this is actually pretty interesting. After the advisory committee came out with their recommendation, the Bayer company, which makes aspirin, started running ads saying, the acetaminophen can cause you liver damage. This is what these experts have said. And McNeil came in and told the FDA that this was costing them millions of dollars, these ads, and that they opposed any such warning because they thought it would frighten consumers, and they also thought, well, these are essentially people who are committing suicide, who were taking too much of this drug, and they didn't favor the liver warning. And as I said, it eventually was adapted by the FDA in 2009.
Meanwhile, who knows how many people were impacted by it not being there.
Right.
Is the FDA, it just sounds like the FDA is so much more easily cajoled into doing what industry wants. A few weeks ago on the program, we had an attorney talking about the problems with NuvaRing, the contraceptive device, that Merck & Company knew led to a potentially double risk of blood clots, and yet even though the FDA had initially wanted a label to warn women and doctors about that, it was not included, even though the same problems were experienced with Ortho Evra, Johnson & Johnson product, and the label did include such a warning. And the whole thing seemed to come down to industry lobbying and this revolving door of people that have been in industry, in the FDA, back to industry, back to the FDA. Is there any revolving door issue here?
Well, there is a revolving door issue. In fact, one of the people that the Johnson & Johnson and McNeil hired back in the late 70s to go try and put on a warning label was someone who had been involved in this process at the FDA before, leaving the FDA and becoming a lawyer. Many years later, back around 2000, they hired as their vice president for research and development someone who had been involved in regulating their drug at the FDA. So there is a revolving door. I think it's more complicated than that. I think there are other issues. First of all, the FDA is one of the few government agencies that's partially funded by the people that they regulate, the drug industry. They collect about 1/3 of their budget from fees from pharmaceutical companies who are getting their drugs approved by the FDA.
And it probably becomes even more difficult as those budgets are crunched and they have to rely even more on industry.
Yeah, I think the other thing about the FDA is that there's not a penalty for doing nothing.
Right.
Which is sometimes true of a lot of government agencies. So there's kind of an inertia that develops, and in fact, some of the memos that we saw from inside McNeil show that they were concerned about if things get too much publicity, it might in turn prod the FDA to do things. So if there's not a lot of public attention and the media is not writing about things and nobody's kind of keeping an eye on it, then there's no pressure on the FDA.
Well, I tell you, sir, this is one of those stories that you've just got to keep talking about. It's been a pleasure to have you. Jeff Girth of ProPublica talking to us about the dangers of acetaminophen and other important issues there. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Alrighty, in the next hour, we are going to talk about crazy Republicans like Congressman Louis Gohmert with Democratic strategist Jason Stanford of Texas and other great conversations as well. So stick around and we'll be back after this.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM, broadcasting live from Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in D.C.
You're listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News Service. I'm Jesse Russell.
Organized labor received some good news in the midst of its 2013 Constitutional Convention in Los Angeles this week. On Monday, an Indiana judge ruled that the state's right-to-work law was unconstitutional. Judge John Cedilla ruled the law unconstitutional because it required unions to provide benefits to non-members without just compensation. The law was challenged by Operating Engineers Local 150, and the union's general president, James Callahan, announced the ruling on the convention floor.
Local 150 argued Indiana's right-to-work law is unconstitutional because it makes it illegal for unions to collect fees for services that are federally required to be provided. This is a victory for the middle class. These laws are nothing but thinly veiled tools to weaken unions, and this is a big win for workers who rely on unions to provide decent wages and benefits.
On Thursday, Indiana Attorney General Greg Zoller filed an appeal to the ruling, and it will be sent directly to the Indiana Supreme Court. That announcement came shortly before a resolution was introduced and passed, calling on the AFL-CIO to develop a Southern organizing strategy. The resolution was partially born out of the predominance of right-to-work laws that have been passed in Southern states over the last decade. AFSCME Florida Council 79 President Jeanette Wynn spoke on the floor to explain how right-to-work laws have been detrimental to working people all across the South.
Suppression of dues deduction, suppression of pension, and suppression of all those state benefits that state employees have earned throughout their career.
This week, the labor movement also became more inclusive by adopting a resolution supporting gender identity and expression. The resolution, which passed unanimously, means the AFL-CIO will officially recognize the rights of transgendered employees. International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers International President Ed Hill introduced the resolution.
This amendment makes an important statement about the Federation's support for transgender workers and the fact that they are welcome in our movement. It shows that we're a broad and inclusive movement that welcomes all workers.
You've been listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Brought to you with support from the Bank of Labor, a division of Brotherhood Bank and Trust, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. The Bank of Labor is union-owned, union-represented, and the bank of choice for unions and their members. Now you can work with a bank that shares labor values. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
Over 13 million people are affected by famine, war, and drought in the Horn of Africa. Unfortunately, just listening to this commercial won't help them. Just listening won't give them their next meal, or shelter, or hope. You can help by texting GIVE to 777-444 to donate $10 and by going to usaid.gov/FWD to forward the facts. Brought to you by the Ad Council and USAID. Text donations go directly to Consortium of Humanitarian Relief Organizations. Standard text and data rates apply.
Question:
Is making higher education available to every American more important to our national interest than letting Wall Street profiteers make a few more billions of dollars each year? Answer: of course. Yet, our political leaders, pushed by Wall Street lobbyists, have been making the opposite choice for years. As a result, banksters have loaded students down with a mountain of high-interest loans, rising from just over $2 billion a decade ago to nearly $1 trillion last year. Worse, the financiers, either banks or government lenders, have become the gatekeepers of advanced education, shutting out thousands of young people wanting to get ahead but not able to hurdle the formidable financial barrier. This is enormously costly to America and completely unnecessary. The smart choice, as we learned from the GI Bill after World War II, would be to make college and professional training free. Universal access to higher education, i.e. free access, produces a very high return on the public's investment while also producing a widely shared prosperity and a broadly educated citizenry. Of course, an upfront investment in a smarter, more productive, more democratic civilization is pricey. So where do we get the money to do what America needs? Get it from where it went. Wall Street's super-rich speculators are now making millions of super-fast robotic financial transactions per second, generating trillions of dollars a year for them, but producing nothing of real value for us, while distorting and endangering markets. This is Jim Hightower saying, put a tiny tax on each of those automated gambles by speculators, and more than enough money will come into the public coffers to free up higher ed for all. For information, check out United States Students Association at www.usstudents.org.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C. Heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with David Shuster.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Alrighty, welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch all weekend. Look me up online, karlfrisch.com. That's KarlFrisch.com. Sign up for my email list and follow me on Twitter and Facebook and all the other social media networks that you use. We've got Peter and Rachel and Troy on the controls, and a shout out to our affiliate in Chicago, WCPT, Chicago's Progressive Talk. If you've been watching the debate in Washington as the government is ground to a halt in the shutdown, whether it's over Obamacare, it has been riddled with crazy right-wing rhetoric by the likes of Michelle Bachmann, Louis Gohmert, Glenn Beck, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul. I could actually spend the remainder of the show talking about each one of these people in detail. It's great that these people are leading the charge when it comes to the right-wing message force. I don't know if you saw Michelle Bachmann down at the World War II memorial when Republicans decided that was going to be their messaging device of the day. But Michelle Bachmann was down there kissing and fondling our octogenarian Greatest Generation members, World War II vets, kissing on them and talking about how dare anybody use them as a prop. It was as if she wanted to become a meme, like she was going to get struck from heaven by a bolt of lightning that turned her meta immediately. And it just shows how utterly clueless they are when it comes to this stuff. I mean, it's as if every time somebody points out something that this shutdown has done, they immediately, the Republicans immediately go to create some kind of a funding device to fix it. For example, they find out that there are some vets that want to see the monuments, and they create a funding bill to open up the monuments. They find out that there are some really sad stories about children with cancer who aren't going to get NIH, National Institute of Health funding for their treatment, and they immediately decide that they want to fund the NIH, and so on. So I thought it would be great to talk about some of the more crazy instances of right-wing rhetoric this week with Jason Stanford. He's a Democratic strategist and syndicated columnist from the great state of Texas, a state that has given us wonderful people like Ted Cruz, George W. Bush, Karl Rove, Rick Perry, Louis Gohmert, the list goes on and on. Thank you, Jason, for joining us and for providing us with the political comedy we also richly deserve.
It is my pleasure. It is my pleasure. I mean, if there's one thing we're proud of in Texas, it's our propensity to cover up our insecurities with owning lots of guns. If there's another thing we're really proud of, it's how many stupid politicians we produce.
Well, I mean, it's really as if your number one it's as if your number one cash crop of export is nuts.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like it's Oregon and politicians are pot. I mean, all we do is put out...
No, because then there'd actually be some discussion over whether or not they should be legal. So what you've been watching the debate this week over the shutdown. What have been your favorite highlights?
Well, I've been trying to compile the stupidest thing a Texan said this week, and it's a really...
Don't you have a job?
Yeah, I know. This has been a big choice this week. I mean, what does it say when the top 3 stupid things a Texas Republican said this week doesn't include Ted Cruz? I mean, this is a rare week.
So, okay, hit us with the first one.
Okay, the first one has nothing to do with Washington, thank God. It's Rick Perry. Last weekend, his wife was giving an interview.
This is fascinating.
All the things that were going on down there. Good old Anita. Everyone likes her. And she was talking about how, well, states do these kinds of things, and it's not that crazy to do this. But, abortion really is a woman's choice, and she actually said that, a woman's choice. And then she went on to talk about how she didn't have a problem with a woman using her own judgment to, return it. The body language was even more eloquent. It was like she was like going, oh, God, I know I'm going to catch it for this. I mean, she almost had her fists up in a ball and her eyes closed. It was so obvious she knew what she was saying. So the journalist did what the journalists do, and they put her quotes on the Texas Tribune website, and seconds had gone by before Rich Parsons, the governor's spokesbot, he called the reporter, told her to stay where he was, and tried to lobby her to change it. So God bless him, they put up the video, and it was just even more obvious. So this week, Rick Perry, to do his part to exacerbate the gender gap, told people, and went to another state, I think it was Pennsylvania, and said that his wife was just wrong, but she hadn't really said what you thought she had said, even though they quoted her directly. She just put the wrong word in the wrong place, although he never really specified which word in which place. It was all kind of taken out of context.
Right, you're taking me out of context, and then you say, well, what's the context? And it's, look over there, and they run away.
Exactly. But clearly, what we're supposed to get from all this is women can't be trusted to state their own opinions in Texas.
Well, and it wouldn't be the first time. I mean, think back, right? Gerald Ford was pro-life, but Mrs. Ford, Betty Ford, was pro-choice. A lot of Nancy Reagan was pro-choice. Barbara Bush was pro-choice. Laura Bush is pro-choice, and we find out probably pro-gay marriage. So it's not unusual for the spouse of a politician to have different viewpoints. In fact, it's probably a throwback to a time some 40 years ago to have a husband come out and contradict the spouse.
Yep. Exactly.
So what's the next one on your list? Okay, that's fine and good. It happened in Texas by a politician who's not running for re-election. Go Wendy Davis. What's your next on the list?
And second one is one you've probably all heard about, Randy Neugebauer, who has my favorite name, which I have been mispronouncing for his entire
See, my favorite
career.
member of Congress name is what is his name? Mark Wayne Mullen. Mark Wayne Mullen. There's no hyphenation. There's no space between Mark Wayne. His name is double wide, like the trailer his mentality comes from.
Absolutely. Well, good old Randy. He was part of that trying to politicize the World War II memorial there, and he was yelling at a park ranger there who was doing her unpaid job, we might add, at the time, trying to keep it closed so that we didn't have to pay for the garbage collectors and everyone else to go through. And Randy was so incensed that the barricades were there in the first place because he had shut down the government, that he asked if she were ashamed. I mean, he said, "You should be ashamed. Are you ashamed?" And God bless, the woman just looked at him and said, "No."
Good for her. What an asshat.
Trying to grandstand on an unpaid federal employee who's trying to compensate for his inability to do his job. It's
ludicrous, and I don't want us to run out of time, so let's hit the next one as well.
The next one, John Culberson, who was famous last week for saying, like 9/11, let's roll, in referring to the government shutdown. This week gave it a really contentious sit-down to Salon magazine, and in it, he's talking about how Obama, he will negotiate with, quote, terrorists anywhere, end quote, but not us. Then they started asking him about Obamacare, and then he said, and pre-existing conditions, and he said, that's never been a problem. I know that hits close home to you, Carl.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
The staggering idiocy in that one sentence. Just, that's never been a problem.
Well, when they deny reality, they don't really need to know what's in Obamacare.
That's a good point. I mean, I think we might be seeing some Andy Kaufman-esque performance art on a scale that we're really not prepared for as humans, or they're just really bad at government.
Well, I mean, you should be proud that Texas continues to have the largest number of people in the idiot caucus in Congress.
We really do.
But the demographics are changing. That'll fix that problem soon enough, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, before I let you go, we got like a minute left. I don't want to stick it all on crazy because there is some good stuff happening in Texas. Wendy Davis is running for governor. We've got like 30 seconds. Give us her chances.
I think, I know it sounds crazy, but we just got to get people to vote. Texas is not a Republican state. It is the worst voting state. We just got to engage people. Finally, we have a leader around whom we can rally them. So this is a good thing. Wendy Davis for governor.
All righty. Jason Stanford, Democratic strategist, syndicated columnist. Follow him on Twitter at JAS Stanford. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, man. Talk to you later.
All righty. Coming up in the next segment, I want you to stick around. We're going to talk about Herman Wallace's 41 years in solitary confinement. You won't want to miss it, so stick around, and we'll be right back.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
100% success rate in modifying free consultations at 2%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit hud.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/guard reserve to learn more. including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the ARC. The ARC is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The ARC is also home to the ARC Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the ARC, so stop by and see them. The ARC, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the ARC's website, www.thearcdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The ARC, part of Southeast D.C. We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. Or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
Alrighty, welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch all weekend. There's a piece of legislation proposed in Quebec, up in Canada, our neighbor to the north. And the legislation would essentially make it illegal for public servants, politicians, public officials to wear religious clothing. So if you're Christian, maybe it's wearing a crucifix around your neck. If you're Muslim or Sikh, it might be something else. It's an interesting look at how far secularization can go in places where these issues come up for debate. And to join us to chat about it, we've got Jacob Reams. He's a research fellow at Harvard University, and he's got an interesting take on this. Jacob, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So, here in America, we are often surprised at how secular other countries can be. Whether it's the notion that, a politician who campaigns on Christianity would be soundly rejected in most of Western Europe, or legislation like this that kind of puts the kibosh on public displays of religiosity by individuals. What's going on in Quebec that this bill would come up?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that are important to recognize about the context. One is that Quebec used to be, until about a generation and a half ago, was a very religious society. It was a very Catholic society, really in a period that is now sometimes called the Great Darkness, was a period that was where Quebec was controlled by very conservative politicians and a very conservative Catholic Church. And in the 1960s, Quebec really left that behind in what was called the Quiet Revolution. People stopped going to church. People stopped listening to their priests on political issues. The whole national and nationalist culture shifted from being based on Catholicism to being based on what we'd recognize as a secular social democracy.
Well, I mean, it kind of mirrors what happened in France, in French Canadian France. I mean, in terms of the Catholic Church's hold over a country.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things that's particularly interesting about that is that for much of the 19th and early 20th centuries, Quebec presented itself as what France should be, that France had become too secular. And so what happens in the 1960s and 1970s is that particularly Quebec intellectuals start wanting to emulate France, and that's where we see now a lot of this culture of secularism, or this politics of secularism, is a very new and self-conscious copying of France, not a historical roots in France.
Well, and you've got various nationalistic movements across Western Europe, which are mostly anti-Muslim movements. How much does that have a play or a hand in Quebec?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that this is largely directed at Muslims, particularly at Muslim women. In fact, one of the things that we've seen in the last few weeks in which Quebec has been debating the Charter of Values is a rise in hate crimes, harassment, and attacks against Muslim women, or against veiled women, I should say. So there is definitely some of that. It's also I think, an honest question that's not just about being anti-Muslim, about what should the public sphere look like, and what should the role of religion be in government and in the public sphere.
Well, and I've spent a lot of time in Quebec. I lived in Vermont for a while, and the notion that I could get to Montreal within 90 miles was fascinating to me as somebody who grew up in Los Angeles, and it took days to get outside of the state, let alone into another country. And the idea that secularization, it's one thing for a secular society to have no endorsement of a religion. This has the feel of shutting people out from the institutions of government. How are Christian folks responding to it? I mean, a lot of the movements, the naturalistic movements in Europe, are primarily Christian-driven, or so they would say, Christian-driven. And, you know, the notion that this would preclude, Muslims, Sikhs, Jews, First Nations people, how are they responding?
Well, there's a lot of diversity is one answer. One thing to remember, and one of the ironies of this legislation, is that it would be passed in a National Assembly, in a legislature, which has a crucifix above the speaker. It would be passed in a province where the national flag has a cross, and for fleur-de-lis, which is a symbol of the Christian Trinity and the Virgin Mary. So on one hand, there's a clear irony to this legislation, which claims to be about secularism, but which also is not secular for everyone. Right? No one's suggesting that public servants are going to start going to work on Christmas. But there's also there's a lot of discussion about that, and there's a lot of discussion about that even for Christians and cultural Christians. One of the things that's happened is that the Catholic Church in Quebec has said, the bishops have said, we wouldn't mind getting rid of the crucifix if that's what you want to do. We're not married to to having a crucifix in the National Assembly. Mm-hmm. So there has been some real soul searching about what does it mean, what should the proper role of Christianity be, and one thing to remember is that what in French it's ostentatious, conspicuous signs of religion, including crosses, would also be banned. Although, of course, it's a lot easier to have an inconspicuous cross than to have an inconspicuous yarmulke or an inconspicuous Sikh turban.
Well, and since most Christians don't have a particular style of dress, I mean, you can obviously find some Orthodox Christian faiths that do, but they're extremely rare.
Exactly, and it's very rare in most Christianity, most forms of Christianity, particularly in Catholicism, which is what's at issue in Quebec, where one of the requirements of the religion, as practiced by anybody, is that people have to dress in a particular way.
Yeah, something tells me if Catholics had to wear a collar like their priests, we wouldn't be having this conversation. What's the opposition been like thus far?
The opposition has been from many directions. The opposition, there is an opposition that says we shouldn't be telling, particularly women, because this is mostly directed at women, we shouldn't be telling women what they can and cannot wear on their bodies, a sort of a feminist response. There's a multiculturalist response. There's a response by sovereigntist, which is say nationalist politicians, who say this is not the right fight to be having. There are, I think most interestingly, there is an attempt to come up with a middle ground, a softening of the proposed law to say, let's have this only apply to what they're calling people in coercive positions, so judges or police or prosecutors. And then there's a question about what's the line of coercion. Is a teacher coercive? And some people say yes, and some people say no. But that is a lot of where the debate is going. Is should you have a religious someone who is obviously religious be or presenting their religion in an obvious way be in a coercive position?
Jacob Reeves, research fellow at Harvard University. We're going to have to keep tabs on this story. It's absolutely fascinating. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
This is Take Action News, and up next we're going to talk about the 41-year solitary confinement of Herman Wallace, who died this week. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. All weekend. So Chief Judge Brian Jackson of the United States District Court in the Middle District of Louisiana ordered this week the state to immediately release Herman Wallace from custody. According to his legal team, Wallace, who was dying of liver cancer and had just days to live, served over 40 years in solitary confinement for the 1972 murder of Brett Miller, a white prison guard at Louisiana's infamous Angola prison, which is formerly a slave plantation. Wallace was convicted of the murder alongside two other Black Panthers. They came to be known as the Angola Three and maintained their innocence, insisting that they had been framed in an effort to silence their political activism as members of the first Black Panther Party chapter. Joining us to talk about his release and his death is the writer Rania Khalek, and a friend of the show, indeed. Rania, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
So tell us about this story. I mean, I can't even fathom. I mean, you hear horror stories about people that spend a week or a day in solitary confinement. Herman Wallace spent 41 years in solitary confinement.
Yeah, it's really just an awful, awful story. It's also tragic. Herman Wallace, like you said, over 4 decades in solitary confinement, which the international community largely considers to be a form of torture. A couple of years ago, the UN Repertoire on Torture actually came out and said that anything longer than solitary confinement longer than 15 days, it actually leads to permanent psychological damage. So you can imagine the effects of over 4 decades in those conditions. And yeah, the situation with Herman Wallace, I mean, he was convicted, as was Albert Woodfox, who's still in prison, of this murder. There was there's no evidence, actual physical evidence linking Wallace to the crime. The witnesses who testified against him did so in exchange for favors from the prosecution. I mean, it's just, there's prosecutorial misconduct, there was inadequate defense counsel. I mean, it's just the worst, everything that could go wrong in the trial went wrong.
Well, and it's one thing to have any one of these as part of your case, right? So you can have people, not everybody who gets favors from the government, like a reduced sentence or whatever, lies when they testify. But when you have inadequate counsel, when you've got people getting favors as the substance of the prosecution against you, and all of these other things added together, at the very least, you're like, there should be a new trial.
Right, exactly. And the really sad thing is he's been obviously in solitary confinement all this time. The only reason it seems that a judge came out and said he needs to be released, well, he said it was because the grand jury during his original indictment, I guess, had excluded women. There were no women on the grand jury, so that was in violation of the 14th Amendment. So he ordered a new grand jury. And I just recall, the day that a few hours before he passed away, the grand jury re-indicted him. So it's just amazing. I mean, and after 40 years, he finally gets out because he's basically dying, and his last few days are spent literally in and out of consciousness. I mean, it's just, the whole entire story is tragic. On top of that, the fact he has liver cancer. Liver cancer can be treatable if it's caught in time, and it wasn't until he lost 40 to 50 pounds that he was even given, a medical, physical.
Which is not uncommon. I mean, there are people in solitary in California, I know, that have undiagnosed medical problems, and even when they are diagnosed, aren't getting the care that they deserve.
Exactly. And there's just so many. I mean, I really believe the state of Louisiana put this man through hell. And, it's great. Luckily, he got to leave before he died. He got to actually be free before he died. But at the same time, it's like justice denied.
Well, that's the thing here, right? Even if you disregard the evidence that shows that he was perhaps not at fault here, even if he was guilty, this is not how you treat somebody. Mm-hmm. Period. It's a human being, regardless of guilt.
Exactly. And there's still another man. Let's not forget, Albert Woodfuss is still in isolation, is still in prison for this crime. And his trial had the same problems. So, I really hope people who are moved by what happened to Herman Wallace will really, do what they can to try and petition or, some sort of retrial of Albert Woodfuss as well. And this is really, sorry, go ahead.
What dynamic do you think, at least in the initial efforts, prosecution, do you think the Black Panther Party element played?
Oh, there's no question that these men were clearly targets because of their political activism. This is at a time in the 70s when, the Black Panther Party was sort of on the rise. People were scared of it. And inside prisons especially, there was a lot of uprisings, in some places riots, and so there was definitely a fear of black prisoners. There still is, but this time was really like a sort of a contentious. This was there's a lot of tension.
Well, we still see, whether or not you think the Black Panther Party was ever good at achieving the aims that it sought, we still see this race-tinged commentary surrounding them. Look at Fox News. You have the Black Panther story around voter intimidation from a couple years ago, where there were like 2 Black Panthers in the entire state of Ohio who were standing outside of a polling place, and Fox News has probably collectively devoted a bazillion hours to the story.
Yeah.
Being conservatively speaking.
It's really just like the Black Panther movement in general, where they really pose a threat to the status quo.
Well, and they could just come out and say what they mean. Fox News could say, breaking news, there are black people at the polling place.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what you hear. It's the dog whistle, but I don't think it's a very well-covered dog whistle.
No.
But it's just, there's no doubt that this was around a time when there was a lot of tension and a lot of fear. And this is also, remember, Angola prison, and like you mentioned in the opening, we used to be a plantation.
Right.
And people still, the prisoners there, they work the farm, they pick cotton.
Well, that's the I wouldn't say amusing, but the disheartening thing is that a lot of these prisons today are, in essence, government-run plantations or corporate-run plantations where prisoners, folks that are incarcerated, perform work for menial wages that get paid into a special account sometimes for them. You're talking about cents per hour as opposed to dollars per hour. Or are responsible for the upkeep of the entire prison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's basically, prisons are basically warehouses for the most marginalized people in society. Oftentimes, the poorest people, poor people of color. They do. They work for a lot of corporations. A lot of U.S. corporations actually use prison labor.
It's big money. And this is not to say, I want to be very clear for the listeners at home, nobody is saying that we shouldn't have prisons, and nobody is saying that, that we should let every prisoner out because they're horrible places to be. What we're saying is that these people are human beings, and that, yes, this is punishment, but it needs to be humane punishment. When we say that people have a right to a defense, we mean that they have a right to a real defense.
Well, also, real quick, also to mention, there's 60% of people in prison are in there for nonviolent offenses.
Right.
So, also, just throwing that out there, we have a lot of...
Many of them are drug-related offenses, and what happens in prison, and, people can look this up online, let's say that you are addicted to drugs and get caught dealing to supply your habit. You go to jail, and there's not any way in a lot of prisons for you to be rehabilitated from being a drug addict. There are very few resources for drug rehabilitation in jail. So what you learn in jail is not getting rehabilitated and getting weaned off of the drugs. What you learn is how to be a criminal from the violent sectors of the prison.
And also, when you get out of jail, you have no rights. Literally, you can't vote, you can't get public assistance, you can't get public housing, no one will hire you, usually.
So, I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that we still need prisons. People are still going to commit crimes, but we have to be smart about this. I mean, if you want to talk like a conservative, there are cheaper ways to do this so that we don't continue to produce people who continue to be a problem. If somebody goes to jail, the goal should not be to eventually let them out so that they can go right back in. The goal should be to reform them into productive members of society.
Which is rehabilitation, right? And that's not necessarily what our prisons focus on. Our prisons are more about, getting revenge.
And it would be a lot cheaper, too.
It would be more productive for society in general.
On many levels. I mean, and not just the cost of prisons, but on all kinds of government programs and whatnot. Ron Yakolich, are we watching this other gentleman? Will he likely have another trial coming up?
I believe that his petition for habeas corpus is sitting in the courts. That's just kind of like what was happening with Herman Wallace before, so I'm not sure. I mean, we'll just have to keep our eye on that, and hopefully that will be moved forward sooner. I don't want to see in another few years that Albert Ward Fox is on his deathbed and now is being released from prison. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. These people deserve to be treated like human beings.
All righty. Ron Yakolich, thanks so much for joining with us to talk about this important story. People can go to your website, ronyakolich.com, to keep up on this and see how things develop. Ron, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
All righty. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the issue of prisoners' rights in solitary confinement with the ACLU's representative on the subject. So stick around. You won't want to miss the discussion as it continues.
Education beyond high school, a path to opportunity and success for our young people, and the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream, because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are federal student aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentAid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Marins, and I'm here to talk to you about Take Action News with David Shuster. Every week we talk politics, government, and what you can do to take action. David Shuster talks with today's leading political minds.
Valerie, so many people will know your name, know your story because of those dastardly actions by the Bush administration to try to discredit your husband, who called them out for their lies that led up to the Iraq War. And in so going after him, they leaked your name. 10 years since the start of the Iraq War. Has your perspective on any of this changed? Do you still carry around any sort of anger or frustration to the Bush administration? How have you been dealing with it all these years?
Until the right is able to come to terms
with the reality that we were lied into this war and it was not a good idea and it wasn't to liberate the Iraqi people. They will just continue to live in, la-la land and perpetuate the lies that got us into the war in the first place.
Tune in from noon to 3 p.m. every Saturday, right here on We Act Radio.
When our daughter Ava was 4, we noticed she didn't talk much. A genetic test revealed that she had hearing loss caused by 2 mutated genes. One she inherited from myself, the other from her dad. If it weren't for the amazing people at U of M, we might have never known the true cause of Ava's hearing loss or how to properly treat it.
The University of Michigan C.S. Mott Children's Hospital is one of only a handful of hospitals in the world researching genetic hearing loss in addition to treating it. Our breakthrough research and advanced treatments combined with outstanding care help us change children's lives in extraordinary ways. For the leaders who invest in pediatric care, call a Mott Patient Advisor at 877-475-MOTT or visit mottchildren.org.
She is more talkative now and more social. She loves music now. She's humming to the music, and it's sweet to actually hear her humming.
To learn more, call 877-475-MOTT.
They not only helped us find answers, they helped Ava find her voice.
That's the Michigan difference.
Alrighty, welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com. We've been talking about the issue of prisoners' rights and how horrible the situation is revolving around solitary confinement. Digging a little bit deeper into the issue, we've got Amy Fettig. She's the Senior Staff Counsel from the ACLU's National Prisons Project. Amy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, how does one end up in solitary confinement?
Well, there are many ways you can end up in solitary confinement because it's used, it's overused in this country. It can be used for disciplinary reasons, but it also can be used for what's called protective custody or protective segregation. And that means an individual is considered to be too vulnerable to be in the general prison population. And so, unfortunately, they get placed in solitary confinement for their own protection, but of course, solitary causes its own harms. But solitary is also used just as a prison management tool, and that's for individuals who are difficult or considered difficult to manage in the regular prison setting, so they are segregated in solitary confinement. But those individuals can perhaps be violent, but on the other end of the spectrum, sometimes it's used for folks who complain, for folks who file lawsuits to protect their own rights, and who are just considered to be a nuisance. So solitary has many names, it has many forms, but unfortunately the harm is generally the same.
And what recourse do prisoners have when they're put in there and it's not for their protection, for example? I imagine sometimes prisoners prefer to be in solitary for a period for their protection, but how does one petition or try to get removed from solitary?
Well, the truth is there's very little that they can do. You could serve a disciplinary sentence and then leave solitary confinement, but for many, especially those who are spending, months, years, even decades in solitary confinement, it's very true that once in, never out. It very rarely can a prisoner do much to change his or her situation. And so they're really at the mercy of the prison officials. Oftentimes there will be some review every year, but often this is mostly just a paper review. So the prisoners will often tell you that they've been sitting in solitary confinement for 6 months, a year, 2, 3 years, and they really don't know how to get out.
Well, and so that's where y'all come in, and I assume that cases have to be filed or suits have to be filed to spring people from such situations. And are there efforts to make the conditions of solitary more tenable?
Well, there has been litigation over the years by the ACLU and other groups to help prisoners, for example, to ensure that seriously mentally ill individuals are not placed in solitary because although it harms everyone, it harms individuals who have mental illness disproportionately, makes their disease worse. And we've had some successes in the courts saying that placing individuals who have serious mental illness in solitary confinement violates the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution. But quite frankly, the law in most jurisdictions does not provide enough protection. We need stronger regulations of this practice, stronger oversight, and stronger legal protections. I mean, the honest truth is that the thousands of people in solitary confinement in this country don't have lawyers to protect them. They don't have anyone who knows what's happening to them, and the laws are currently insufficient to provide them the protections that they need.
Well, in compounding that problem, you've got the issue of corporate prisons, right? So these corporate prisons, which in many cases are protected from discovery, even though they're serving the function of a government. You can't FOIA a private prison in many states for internal documents. So even, we may not even know how bad it is given what secrets might be out there, right?
That's absolutely true. From private prisons to actually state prisons and county jails. One of the key problems with solitary confinement is it is a practice that is happening behind bars, but there is very little reporting or accountability about how it's practiced, who it's practiced on, how long they're placed there, how they can get out. It's a huge government accountability problem. It is exacerbated in the context of private prisons, which, as you say, are not subject to state FOIA laws, not subject to the federal FOIA law. So what they're doing is anybody's guess.
And the private prisons, their response to that, and this is truly sick, so I want people to hear this. Their response is that to subject them to Freedom of Information Act requests would be to allow their competition to know their internal business practices and remove their competitive advantage.
Right. And my response to that would be any entity that takes on the role of the government should be subject to the same protections, the same transparency as the government. Our problem here is that we have private corporations who are acting in the stead of the government as punishers of people,
right.
Take away the freedom. That is the most extreme form of government control, and frankly, it shouldn't be in the hands of any private corporation.
But if it was, and I mean, if we took these people to heart, that they were being honest when they said the reason they wanted, private corporations to run our prisons is because it's cheaper and they can do it better and blah, 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 blah. Well then, okay, if we trust that that's true and that's your true motivation, then surely you would want to see how it is that they're saving this money. There is never a good argument against good government transparency and sunlight.
Absolutely not. And we know from personal experience, from the history of humanity, that where there is darkness in government operations, in corporate operations, there is corruption and there are problems. And we've got to remember that these private prison corporations, they are using taxpayer money.
Right.
They are acting in our name, and therefore they should be open and accountable to the people.
Well, and to that point, it's not only are they acting in our name and are they doling out punishment, but, with the horror stories we've seen, it should be impressed on, significantly more that we need more transparency here. I think of, corporate America outside of the issue of private prisons and how the second the eye is taken off the ball, major corporations in this country will do whatever they can to maximize profits. Which is why we have to be even more diligent when it comes to institutions like private prisons, because if we do take our eye off the ball, if there's not transparency, they're going to do whatever they can to make more money.
That's absolutely true. And the only way you can make more money is to not train your staff, to pay your staff poorly, to not have enough staffing, to not provide appropriate rehabilitative care. And so
cut
really
corners with safety. I mean, there's all kinds of...
Absolutely. Yes. So the only way you make money is really by undermining public safety.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like, if you were having private companies make our roads, the question would be, well, how can they make more money? Well, by making shoddy or less well-constructed roads, and nobody would want that.
Right. Well, that's a raw deal for American taxpayers, and it's one we should not pay.
All right. We've got less than a minute left, but I wanted to ask you, what can people at home do about the subject of prisoners' rights?
Be engaged. Don't ignore the prisons in your backyard. What happens there happens in your name. And it's important that you find out about what's happening in the prisons in your state, in your locality. I would say also, demand that your representatives take action and care about what happens in prisons and ensure that they are humane places that promote public safety and that assist people to re-enter the community so they can be productive citizens. That's something that we should all want and
Absolutely.
we should all care
We should all
about.
be fighting for it. Amy Fettig from the ACLU's National Prison Project, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
In the next hour on Take Action News, we're going to talk more about the government shutdown. We're going to talk about the Capitol Hill shooting and more. So stick around. We'll be right back after this.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Why would former Attorney General Ramsey Clark care whether the Army major found guilty of mass murder at Fort Hood is forced to shave his beard?
My name is Ramsey Clark, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Major Nadal Malik Hassan, who represented himself but offered no defense in his military trial, was found guilty of murdering 13 soldiers at Fort Hood in November 2009 and sentenced to death. He now sits on the Army's death row in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, pending the result of his automatic appeal. Army officials there are insisting that Hassan, who has grown a beard as required by his belief in Islam, must comply with the Army's grooming rule that prohibits soldiers from having a beard or a goatee. And if Hassan won't shave off his beard by himself, the prison will use force to shave it off for him. Hassan might try to stop this by enforcing his rights under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, but no military lawyer is authorized to file that lawsuit for him. So, human rights attorney Ramsey Clark, who has expressed concern over the beard issue and other aspects of Hassan's case, is going to visit him in Fort Leavenworth. We expect Mr. Clark to take the position that in America, religious freedom is a fundamental right for everyone, both the revered and the despised, including a convicted mass murderer on death row in Fort Leavenworth.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
With your Working Virginia update, I'm Doug Cunningham.
We are not fighting just for our members. We are fighting for all working people. We stand up for the working people. Whether you carry a union card or not, we're going to be there for you so that if you're injured on the job, you'll be taken care of. So that if you get sick, you'll be taken care of. So that you can earn a wage so that you can take care of yourself and your family.
Dan Duncan, president of the AFL-CIO's Northern Virginia Central Labor Council. Duncan says the economy is still issue number one for Virginians, and there's been little or no economic stimulus effort from Virginia's government.
The economy is still the most important thing to all of us. We want to make sure that all working people have a job that pays well and takes care of their needs.
Working Virginia Update produced by Workers Independent News. I'm Doug Cunningham.
This update made possible by the Office and Professional Employees International Union, ensuring fair treatment, fair wages, and benefits for thousands of working Virginians. Online at opeiu.org.
Packers.
Vikings.
We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live United.
So give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News Service. I'm Jesse Russell.
Organized labor received some good news in the midst of its 2013 Constitutional Convention in Los Angeles this week. On Monday, an Indiana judge ruled that the state's right-to-work law was unconstitutional. Judge John Sadia ruled the law unconstitutional because it required unions to provide benefits to non-members without just compensation. The law was challenged by Operating Engineers Local 150, and the union's general president, James Callahan, announced the ruling on the convention floor.
Local 150 argued Indiana's right-to-work law is unconstitutional because it makes it illegal for unions to collect fees for services that are federally required to be provided. This is a victory for the middle class. These laws are nothing but thinly veiled tools to weaken unions, and this is a big win for workers who rely on unions to provide decent wages and benefits.
On Thursday, Indiana Attorney General Greg Zoller filed an appeal to the ruling, and it will be sent directly to the Indiana Supreme Court. That announcement came shortly before a resolution was introduced and passed, calling on the AFL-CIO to develop a Southern organizing strategy. The resolution was partially born out of the predominance of right-to-work laws that have been passed in southern states over the last decade. AFSCME Florida Council 79 President Jeanette Wynn spoke on the floor to explain how right-to-work laws have been detrimental to working people all across the South.
Suppression of dues deduction, suppression of pension, and suppression of all those state benefits that state employees have earned throughout their career.
This week, the labor movement also became more inclusive by adopting a resolution supporting gender identity and expression. The resolution, which passed unanimously, means the AFL-CIO will officially recognize the rights of transgendered employees. International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers International President Ed Hill introduced the resolution.
This amendment makes an important statement about the Federation's support for transgender workers and the fact that they are welcome in our movement. It shows that we're a broad and inclusive movement that welcomes all workers.
You've been listening to WIN, the Workers' Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Brought to you with support from the Bank of Labor, a division of Brotherhood Bank and Trust, member FDIC, equal opportunity lender. The Bank of Labor is union-owned, union-represented, and the bank of choice for unions and their members. Now you can work with a bank that shares labor values. More info online at bankoflabor.com.
Oh, drat these computers.
Have you people ever seen computers before?
I hear there's rumors on the internet.
Have views on the Google.
I gotta get on that internet. I'm late on everything.
A series of tubes.
They're so naughty and so complex.
Computers are my forte.
Once again, every time this week, we talk to Alan Rosenblatt, the Dr. Digipole. You can find him on Twitter about the latest and greatest of things happening online. Alan, thanks for joining us.
Always good to be here, Carl.
All right, so I imagine that the Twitterverse and the internet in general has been overwhelmed with shutdown hashtags and all kinds of stuff related to the GOP shutdown of our government.
Yeah, the shutdown hashtag has been really, really busy, and but there's some interesting things that sort of popped out in my mind, and that was there's been a concerted effort coming out from the conservative news media, from Fox News, from John Stossel, from Rush Limbaugh, to downplay the impact of the shutdown as evidence that we don't need the government anyway, and all this kind of stuff, and it just strikes me as there's a huge echo chamber attached to these outlets and these media figures that just echoes what they have to say all over the place, and we really need to hear a concerted effort from the left to point out, no, indeed, there really is a very serious impact on national policy and on the nation as a result of the shutdown. I spent some time over the weekend, over the last few days, tweeting about how, for example, all the civilians at the Defense Department were sent home. And I just heard on the radio that
that most of them have been called back
Right.
by the Secretary of Defense. But part of the teams that got sent home were the civilian teams that set all of our strategy in the Middle East, in Syria, in Iran. To think that that doesn't impact the security of the United States is ludicrous. And we heard that with the SEC being sent home, that it's going to adversely affect and delay the IPO for Twitter, which was hoping to go public before Thanksgiving. And that the president had to cancel his trip to Asia as part of, which was supposed to help with our Asia pivot in foreign policy. He had to cancel it because he had to stay home and deal with the shutdown. Meanwhile, the president or the premier of China is traveling around Asia, basically saying, "You want to be like the United States? Look how unstable they are. You should be like us." So it's clearly hurting us on so many different levels. And I think that regardless of whether people are being brought back to work now from the furlough or that they will successfully be able to get their back pay, I think it's really important now and as we gear up for the debt ceiling debate in 2 weeks, that we hold the Republicans' feet to the fire and that we get all the people out there across the country to tweet and post on Facebook as much as they can about things they see that are getting shut down as the result of the furlough, things that they see that government isn't doing that adversely impacts their life. Because there has to be that kind of counter-messaging because it's really loud and obnoxious coming from the other side.
Well, you know what I would have liked to have seen happen? I would have loved it if we got a whole bunch of people to dress like they were veterans and go to some monument on the Capitol, in the Capitol, and then get some Republican members of Congress to go down there, and then all of a sudden reveal that these were people who needed Obamacare.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. I mean, the irony of, it's so horrible that these veterans couldn't go to see the World War II memorial when there are, people not getting their Social Security and Medicare checks and services, when there are people who aren't able to, ordinary citizens around the country who just aren't able to do a lot of things that they depend on, as if somehow not being able to go see a monument for 150 people is equivalent to some of these more serious impacts of the shutdown.
Well, and it came up during a press conference that really took off all over the internet when Eric Cantor was talking about the young cancer patients that the NIH had clinical trials for, and a reporter said, "So, are you reversing course on the 20% cut that you gave the NIH and the proposed $6 billion cut that you've proposed going forward with any kind of resolution on the budget shortfall?" And Cantor, of course, was, pay no attention, tap dance. But it really lit up the social media.
Well, the thing is that as they're forced to deal with real impacts of the furlough, it only shines a greater light on the cuts that they want to do independently of the furlough and, the shutdown. And I think, the more we start to shine that light, the more people use social media to really, in loud voices, in unified voices, point and shine that light on what is actually being cut. I mean, they're trying to cut $40 billion from food stamps. I mean, this is just taking food out of the mouths of children. I mean, it's so explicitly the result of what they're trying to do. And they're trying to gloss it over and deflect and talk about issues with regard to Obamacare. And, I heard one member of Congress talking about how Obamacare was the worst law ever made by any society
in the world.
In the world. I mean, geez, what about... I mean, the list of more heinous laws that have existed throughout history and even currently is so long that the idea that they could say something like that is just sheer, utter ignorance.
It's shocking. But, for members that don't even know how to explain what's in Obamacare, it's not shocking that these same people would have no concept of other things that have happened throughout history.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, you're talking about a movement whose leaders thought that, Paul Revere had started off in New Hampshire. They're not necessarily the brightest bunch of people. They believe that they've named their movement the Tea Party, which was a rebellion against taxation, but against lack of representation, against corporate influence. So they're not the brightest bulb in the boxes.
Yeah. So my reaction is, add a little levity to what you're trying to do when you're tweeting all these, terrible things. When you're pushing back, I like using hashtags. When I tweet at Ted Cruz for some of his ridiculous things, get real Ted, or when I tweet back at John Stossel, who I find to be incredibly idiotic, I like hashtag BS John. Really, combine your serious message about what's really the impact of the stupid shutdown politics of the right, and mix into it some
be creative. I think that's the key.
Economic terrorism.
Right.
Holding the full
Alan,
of the United States is economic terrorism.
Alan, we're going to have to shut you down, much like the government, unfortunately. But those are all great ideas. Follow him on Twitter, Dr. Digipol. Alan Rosenblatt, thanks for joining us.
Talk to you next week.
All righty, we'll be back with more great talk, so stick around. We'll be back after this.
Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now.
HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. As always, more about me at karlfrisch.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. So, earlier this week, we had a shooting, or so we thought, on Capitol Hill. A woman who attempted to ram a perimeter barrier at the White House was then chased in her car towards the Senate side of the Capitol, where the Senate offices are, where she was ultimately shot and killed. Thankfully, her child, her baby essentially, was in the back seat and was unharmed. This all went down literally steps from the front door of my office. The shooting was probably 20 yards, maybe less, from the door to my office. I was sitting at lunch, a business lunch, and received a phone call from one of the people that I work with saying, and I had basically replied saying, I'll call you back. I'm in a meeting. And they repeatedly texted me, there was just a shooting. So I immediately got on the phone and told them to turn the lights out, lock the doors, go upstairs and hide. It was a frightening day, to say the least. But one of the things that became apparent as we talk about this story is the role that the stigmatization of mental health plays in these kinds of incidents. And I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that subject. So joining us now is our good friend Tara Culp-Ressler. She is the health editor for Think Progress. Tara, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Alrighty, so obviously, we found out maybe a few hours after this incident unfolded that the woman in question who was driving the car was unarmed, but she ended up being killed by Capitol Police. And there's obviously some mental health issues here at play, right?
Yeah, that's right. So obviously we still don't know very much about her motives or very many details about her life or what was going on there, but not too long after this story unfolded, her mother spoke with some news outlets. I think it was ABC News that initially broke the story. And her mother, kind of like the rest of the country, was shocked. She never expected her daughter to do anything like this. She didn't have a history of violence, but she did have a history of depression, and specifically postpartum depression. Her mother said she had been struggling with that in the year after her daughter was born last August.
Well, and this is the same type of thing that we've heard about in cases before, where women have had postpartum depression and killed their children, for example. So these kinds of bizarre incidents are not, they're certainly uncommon, but they do happen.
Right, absolutely. They do happen, and I think that, one of the really important things that this kind of tragic case points to is, the fact that this is an aspect of our society, and it's one that most women don't really feel very comfortable talking about or seeking help for. I think, one of the most tragic things about postpartum depression is that women don't always recognize the symptoms. They don't understand what's happening to them. They, have been raised in the society that's taught them that motherhood is ultimately, the pinnacle of womanhood. It's, it's the one thing that's going to complete their life. It's going to make them unbelievably happy to be a mother. And so It's just, it's confusing when the reality doesn't actually play out that way, and when motherhood isn't actually, all of these idealized things that society has made it out to be. And I can absolutely, my heart goes out to all of these women. I can't imagine how difficult it would be to feel like these mental health issues that you're struggling with makes you a bad mother, or makes you someone who isn't accepted in society, or who can't talk about these things because it means that you don't love your children. I think that's one of the hardest pieces here.
And what's the conversation in the media been about this case in particular? First, of course, like any breaking news story, we're treated to national media who decides to report what they guess is happening as opposed to what is actually happening. But has there been much of a conversation around the woman's mental health?
Not so much that I have seen so far. Obviously, details are still emerging in this case, and over the past few days, there have been some additional reports that, her mother says that she was on medication for her depression, and so it does seem like maybe she was seeking out some type of treatment. But yeah, it's still one of those things that's kind of murky. There aren't, very many solidified details out there, and I think most people are just kind of left, taken aback by this sort of tragic case that came out of nowhere. And I would hope that maybe over the next week or so there would be somewhat more of a conscious discussion about mental health issues. That's something that's always sort of accompanies these kind of tragedies, particularly when they're gun violence tragedies. People want to talk about mental health for a little bit, but that conversation doesn't necessarily get sustained, or that kind of ends up being essentially serving as a pivot away from gun control issues. So yeah, it doesn't really seem like for as much as the mental health issue gets brought up, it doesn't really seem like we're charting kind of intentionally proactive ways forward on it.
Well, it occurs to me that we have a very childlike understanding of what mental health issues are. I mean, you'll hear people say, well, if you think you're crazy, you're not, as if that's
right.
An actual determination of somebody's mental health. And yet, in our justice system even, we say that, somebody can be not guilty by reason of insanity, but in order to do that, they have to they cannot understand that what they did was wrong.
Right.
The idea that you can't be mentally deficient and understand the consequences of what you're doing. I mean, it's as if, so a mass shooter, for example, obviously there's something wrong with that person mentally, despite whether they know what they're doing is right or wrong.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. Sort of a lot of the nuance is lost when we have these kind of conversations. Absolutely. I don't think Americans understand mental illness well enough to, necessarily feel comfortable seeking out the treatment if they're personally struggling with it, or, to apply it kind of in all of these different kinds of nuanced ways without painting with a broad brush people, of all walks of life who have struggled with this kind of mental illness. Because,
which is horrifying.
It is a risk. Yeah,
because
you see that a lot.
We don't understand it, but so many people are touched by it. I mean, one study suggests that 20% of mothers suffer from frequent depression issues after the birth of their child.
Right, absolutely. And I think depression in general is something that's difficult for Americans to understand. A lot of people don't realize that that's technically considered to be a mental health issue. And Americans often just kind of have this attitude of, just deal with it, suck it up. Like, we deal with your feelings. Like, what do you mean you're sad?
Pull yourself up by your own joyous bootstraps.
Exactly. So people, aren't necessarily thinking about all of the different ways that that these issues manifest themselves and what that looks like, and how serious that can be for different people, and ultimately what the options are out there for them.
What are the options for people that feel like they're suffering from mental illness or need help?
Well, absolutely. Especially for women who are about to give birth or have recently given birth. The Centers for Disease Control encourages them to talk to their doctors, to seek out help. One of the great things that the healthcare reform law does is, kind of expand access to mental health services in some ways. There are now insurance plans that are including mental health services as some of the essential benefits that all plans must offer. It's definitely
friggin' Obamacare.
Yeah, exactly. We still have a long way to go. There are a lot of people who can't afford mental health care. There are still plans that, don't necessarily offer it in their, in their kind of essential benchmarks. But it is getting better, and ultimately there are some health professionals who hope that we'll eventually reach a point where we're screening every woman for, signs of depression, for suicidal thoughts. That'll just be, routine questions that doctors are asking expectant mothers or mothers who have recently given birth, so that then, these people won't really fall through the cracks of our healthcare system and they can get connected with the sorts of health resources that they need.
So we've got like 30 seconds left. What can people do in their own backyards to encourage a conversation around these issues?
I think that people just need to not be afraid to have these kinds of conversations with their friends, with their family members, sort of normalize the issues. And I think especially when it comes to gender roles and women specifically, to just, take a step back from the situation and not assume that, motherhood is always a certain kind of way, or that it always makes women, feel certain feelings or achieve some sort of happiness, just to open the conversations and create a safe place where it's okay for mothers to admit that it's hard and, not every day might be sunshine and happiness.
I think that's great advice. Tara Culp-Ressler, the health editor from Think Progress. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alrighty, up next on Take Action News, we're going to talk to Gloria Totten from Progressive Majority about what electorally might happen because of the GOP shutdown. Stick around. It's going to be a great chat.
You're listening to WEAT Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/Cancer Answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/guard-reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
The true definition of hero. And being a hero took a heroic effort.
Every day we bring to our fans the world of sports. We speak of heroes and heroism, but there are days when sports matter little and heroes matter more. These heroes don't hit walk-off homers or buzzer-beating threes. They simply made a plan for what to do when disaster strikes. You never know when you might need to be the hero, because you never know if today is the day before a natural disaster. Prepare, plan, be a hero. Visit ready.gov.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Welcome back. I'm Karl Frisch here at Take Action News. More about me at karlfrisch.com. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Karl Frisch. That's KarlFrisch. It's not like the shutdown. The government shutdown is happening in a vacuum. I remember in 1995 when we had our last government shutdown, I have a confession, a Republican at the time. We all experiment with something in our youth. I just happened to choose politics, which might make you think that I experimented with something else. Back in 1995, there were real consequences for the shutdown. As the result of Newt Gingrich and Bob Dole shutting down the government, Newt Gingrich's popularity went through the floor. And this is a guy who was very popular coming out of the 94 elections, when Republicans won the House of Representatives back for the first time in 50 years. And Bob Dole saw his numbers against Bill Clinton, because everybody knew Bob Dole was going to challenge Bill Clinton, saw his numbers slide from being a front runner to being far behind Bill Clinton. Ultimately, Democrats gained seats in 1998. They gained seats in 2000. Bob Dole got his butt kicked in the 96 election by Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was reelected by a wide margin. And Clinton became what is a very popular president. And that all started with the government shutdown, when Congress thought that they had the president right where they wanted him, and they overplayed their hand. So I have no doubt in my mind that a lot of this stuff is going to happen with the current Republican Congress. I mean, one thing that's occurred to me is that unlike 1995, this Republican Congress has the internet to deal with. So back then you had a number of people that had cable television, you obviously had newspapers and radio, but you didn't have this constant, never-ending stream of people participating in the media, in their own democracy. There was no Twitter, there was no Facebook. There was just, folks watching television and getting their news from the newspaper. So I think that is ultimately going to have a hastening effect on these Republicans in Congress. They were out of, the government was shut down for a number, I think 15 days in 1995. And this week we're basically at 4 days, if you don't count the weekend, that Republicans have had the government shut down. And I think that, they probably can't last much longer than 10 days, or else they're going to start seeing real world impacts on their election possibilities. Of course, Republicans knew that they were going to have difficulty coming forward, so they started trying to rig the system. That's where all these gerrymandering stories come from, where Republicans have drawn their districts so that they have safe seats. If more Republicans were in, say, safe seats that were only 60% Republican or 55% Republican, the government shutdown would be over right now. But you've got a lot of Republicans that are in 70% Republican seats, 70% Republican seats, so that they're not worried about losing re-election. There's this whole notion that that these folks are appeasing the people that are back home. Because, it doesn't matter how deafening the cries in Washington get. The people back at home don't care, and don't care what's happening. Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, has now watched in the Senate, has now watched multiple election cycles slip through his fingers, where Republicans should have been able to win the majority back in the Senate. But because the Tea Party has exerted itself and they've nominated such crazy people to run for office in places like Missouri or South Dakota, all these different places, you've got, he's not been able to pick up the seats he needs. And I think the shutdown is going to really keep people from being able to, Republicans at least, from being able to win back the Senate yet again. There's this thing called Washington Monument Syndrome, and it's basically a political tactic where government agencies, when faced with budget cuts or a government shutdown, they restrict access and the American people get horrified and things get opened up. So the Park Service Director, I guess this is going back maybe 50 years ago, who recently died, is the guy that kind of made this famous when he closed down the Grand Canyon and other big places. And Americans who went to go see these things were confronted with the fact that the parks were not open. And they called Washington, and they'd cut these parks, so these budgets, so the directors had basically shut down the parks. And when the American people started calling Washington, they opened things back up. Budgets were restored. So you've got that same mentality happening here with the Republicans, who are basically taking every piece that becomes unpopular. So we hear about the kids who are not getting cancer funding because of the NIH, and they decide they want to have a funding bill to have the kids with cancer get treatment. They decide that they want a funding bill to get the parks back open. They decide this, they decide that. Anything that becomes popular, and ultimately it doesn't help them in the slightest. And most people are beginning to blame Republicans for the position we're now in. If you look at polling, Obamacare may not be popular, but at the very least, it's more popular than the government shutdown, which people blame Republicans for orchestrating. This is going to have a real-world impact on these close races, which is why you've seen, and I think this coming week you're going to see it even more plain, even more present. Moderate Republicans who, we're told still exist. They're kind of like the dodo bird. I've never seen one. We're told that they still exist, except they keep voting with the Republican majority on these, to keep the government shut down. I think in the next week we're going to see people really trying to put pressure on these moderate Republicans to do an about-face. If Speaker Boehner were to propose a clean, continuing funding resolution, it would pass. It would get Democratic votes, it would get Republican votes, and it would pass, and the Senate would gladly send it on to the president, and we would no longer have to be in this situation. But Republicans are playing politics. The American people are not stupid when it comes to this stuff. So they're ultimately going to, have to pay the price for playing politics here. And I think ultimately I think before the government shutdown, we were likely to pick up Democratic seats. I think following the government shutdown, it's going to be an even better year for Democrats. when it comes to the House of Representatives. When it comes to the Senate, I think Democrats keep the Senate, and we're going to have some surprising victories come November of 2014, because this is not the last step. The government shutdown is only a prelude to the debt ceiling, and we're going to have another fight there in just a matter of weeks, mid to late October. It's fascinating, remarkable, and Republicans have brought it on themselves. We'll obviously dig more into this subject as the weeks continue. And when we come back after this break, there has been a African-American gay guy who was nominated to be a judge, and Marco Rubio, the future savior of the Republican Party, has blocked him to try and get some of his right-wing credo and kudos back that he lost by trying to champion immigration reform. When we come back, we're going to chat with the NB, the National Black Justice Coalition's Sharon Letman about this subject and how it's just not going to work for Rubio when we come back after this. Stick around.
For me, guns are for hunting and protecting my family. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'll fight to protect it. But with rights come responsibilities. That's why I support comprehensive background checks, so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. That protects my rights and my family.
Tell Congress, don't protect criminals. Vote to protect gun rights and our families with comprehensive background checks. Demand action now.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Shuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
Say you want to go to college.
Yay!
A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East.
Go Red Wolves!
Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
100% success rate in modifying free consultation at 2%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit HUD.gov/prevent loan scams.
Are
Our children are exposed to violence every day in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. As we finish up the show this week, Marco Rubio, who is the future savior of the Republican Party to so many, really stepped in it this week. He's withdrawn his support from a federal judicial nominee that he previously recommended, William Thomas, who is a gay black judge from Miami, and it is puzzling a lot of people as to why he would do this. To try and get to the bottom of it, I am now joined by our good friend Sharon Letman Hicks from the National Black Justice Coalition. Sharon, thanks for joining us. Sharon? Alrighty. So essentially this story goes like this.
Hello?
Sharon, thanks for joining us. So what do you make of it? I mean, is Rubio just offering, crumbs to the lunatic fringe of his party that he alienated by pushing for immigration reform?
It's really pretty pathetic that after you put forward your support in the previous term, that all of a sudden you just did a thorough check on the background. So we're like, well, what were you doing last term? And just found just egregious behavior that no one else seems to find or no one else seems to have a concern about. And you are playing judge and jury instead of allowing it to go through the Senate Judiciary Committee. It is reprehensible.
Well, yeah, I mean, you said it best. I mean, the rationale that they offered to the Huffington Post, a spokesman for Rubio said that he was pulling his support, quote, after a thorough review, which does make you question, if you were willing to support him once before, do you not do thorough reviews before you decide to appoint somebody? And this guy would have been historic, right? The first openly gay black man on a federal judgeship.
Absolutely. It's heartbreaking because of this person's stellar record. It is secondary to all of the historic gains. It's the reality that this judge worked all his life to have the credentials that he has. And to be marginalized like this for just a political opportunity, it needs to be called on the carpet. And I'm glad so many voices are speaking out against the hypocrisy of Senator Rubio and his conduct of just needing to stay in the press for these misguided decisions that he keeps making.
Well, and ultimately what this really comes down to is appeasing institutional right-wing conservatives. I mean, they've learned that they're probably not going to win the Senate back. Their hold on the House of Representatives is tenuous at best. They probably won't get the White House back for the foreseeable future. So what they've got to do is try and control the judiciary, which is why they don't want more people on the most important bench this side of the Supreme Court, the D.C. Circuit, and it's why they don't and they haven't allowed so many of the president's judicial nominees to move forward. So you get somebody like Marco Rubio, who's seen as like the savior of the Republican Party, who has seen his support among right-wingers slide because he supported immigration reform. And let's be clear, he didn't really support immigration reform. It was more of a watered-down version of it that he was trying to get through the bigots in his own party. And he sees this as an opportunity to brandish his moderate street cred that he might have gotten from being in favor of immigration reform. And at the same time, he can stick a finger in the eye of a black guy and a gay guy. It's like the lottery's been struck for him in the right wing here.
Well, he clearly has not learned anything from the opportunity to build bridges. I mean, he should have learned or taken a page out of Barack Obama's book in the 2012 election that every constituency matters. For him to want to double down on Judge Thomas like this, even if it wasn't political, what was your motivation? And for what he's claiming it to be. It just doesn't pass the smell test because you nominated him last year.
Well, and what do you attribute it to then?
Well, I mean, you know,
is it homophobia? Is it racism?
If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, when you live at the intersection of race and LGBT equality, it's never either or. It's, oh my goodness, it's too much. It's just like 50 years later, we're finally recognizing that Bayard Rustin was a civil rights leader.
Right. Well, and then inside of that is, you know, it's impossible to know whether Rubio, inside of his heart, is truly homophobic or racist, but it's either that or it's something worse, which is feeling comfortable playing on other people's homophobia and racism, which I think is far worse than actually being an uninformed, uneducated bigot in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even give him that much credibility to have that kind of hate in his heart. I think he's just playing politics at other people's expense.
And that's worse, don't you think?
Absolutely. And you will never rise in leadership if your soul is for sale.
It's so true. What's the response been like in Florida?
It has been a total outrage. I mean, I lived in Florida for over 25 years, as well as when I worked at People for the American Way, I was deeply involved in courts issues. So to even see, one, I'm just tired of hearing the word Florida, like everything that's controversial, and I love my state. But just to see that these are the persons that are getting elected out of Florida, that they get this type of platform and this opportunity to do so much injustice to qualified people and to serious life-altering situations that this country has had to deal with, he should want to do better. He should want to rise from the dust of shame that has been brought through some of the leadership through that state. But he is just becoming business as usual, and he will expire like the rest of those that do not stand for something that's just and right.
Do you think that this is gonna have implications on his potential future run for president?
He does not have a chance in hell unless he decides to become independent to become the nomination of the Republican Party. When he had to drink water, when he had to stand for immigration, everything. Now Ted Cruz has risen from the Phoenix. All of that is a test. We've seen it time and time again. If he wants to keep playing politics instead of really being someone that can be respected and honored for his positions, he's going to be a thing of yesterday.
Well, and to that point, do you think this is desperation, pure and simple? I mean, because if he sees it or even has a inkling that his chances of success are small, it might be, you know, like trying to hit one for the bleachers.
Well, this is not the one that hit for the bleachers because you look like a flip-flopper. Why did he, you know, neither one of these cases happened in the last year, so what was your change of consciousness?
Right.
You leave yourself up for scrutiny when you don't stay the course. This could have ran under everybody's radar because you did not have a problem with this less than a year ago. And for everyone to say that your decisions about this judge are not founded, that he worked completely within his right as a judge, then what is your point? You leave everyone room to speculate about racism and homophobia. You gave us that narrative. And to your point, if you're going to play to those audiences, then shame on you because you are a minority. You come from an oppressed background. And now you want to act like you've arrived? Give me a break.
Well, and the truly crazy thing about it is the notion that this would actually repair the damage he caused himself in the Republican potential nomination campaign with immigration reform. I mean, it's not like they're going to say, well, you showed yourself to be a good, nice bigot, so we'll forget about what you did on immigration reform.
Let me tell you something. People of color issues, oppression issues, from immigration to a black gay judge is not going to change any hearts and minds of anybody that is racist, homophobic.
Well, it's three things they can't stand in the Republican Party: gay people, black people, and judges.
But the reality is his foundational thinking is laughable. So again, if anything, then he just opened up someone's ability to call him a flip-flopper.
Well, and, you know, flip-flops may be in style in Florida, but I think, you know, if he were to even squeak by in a Republican primary, it's these kinds of things that make them look so foreign to what's emerging, the Obama coalition, which is really just the diverse demographics that this country is growing into. You know, you don't have to be when you're anti-gay. It doesn't. It's not gay. You're not being hurt in the polls because gay people are thinking, oh, then we're not voting for you. It's because women and independents look at you like you're crazy and born on Mars that you don't like gay people. And when you're willing to play into these racial issues, it makes you look crazy to independents and women too. And it only makes it harder for you to pull something off in a general election if you ever got there.
Well, one, I don't think he'll ever get there. And more importantly, he needs to start acting like a leader and not someone that we can spend time, good airtime, scrutinizing because he doesn't seem to stand for anything.
Well, it's certainly a fascinating development in his precarious run for the presidency. Sharon Lippman Hicks, the executive director of the National Black Justice Coalition, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. Have a good afternoon.
Absolutely. And that's just about it for the show today. It's been a great show, and I want to thank everybody for being here with us. Take Action News, you can find more about the show, and you can rewatch the show, listen to the show at takeactionnews.com. Don't forget to connect with me. I'm Karl Frisch, KarlFrisch.com. And special thanks to Pete Callahan, Rachel Calvert, and Troy Miller on the controls. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and we'll be back next week. Stick around.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
So let's talk first about how these get scheduled. How do we, what goes between the time the ad council completes the ad and when it shows up on our TV?
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising on the We Act Radio Network. We have a really great show for you this week. We're going to talk with Mothers Demand Action for Gun Sense in America about what's going on across the nation and in Washington, D.C. with moving forward responsible gun safety legislation. Then we're going to hear from the Children's Defense Fund about the ridiculous vote in the U.S. House this week to defund SNAP, which is also known as food stamps. Why that vote was penny-wise and pound-foolish. Next up, we hear from Donna Dolan, who played a tremendous role in winning paid sick days for everyone in the city of New York, which had a rippling repercussion on candidates and whether they won or lost their elections. You're going to want to hear this one. Last up, we close with Ashley Warren Boyd of Moms Rising as we hear about the impact of Obamacare, about the Affordable Care Act, why Congress is using it as a political football, and how you can get access to more affordable health care coverage and more consumer protections. Joining us right now is our first guest, Shannon Watts from Mothers Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. Thank you so much for being on. Shannon, you just got back from Washington, D.C., where you were marking the 9th anniversary of the shootings at the Sandy Hook